This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Today we're going to speak with another podcaster, Dean Carnegie. He is someone who runs the Magic Detective podcast, which I think is very interesting. I certainly think that all of us can or should appreciate where we came from because we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And one of the things that Dean does, or I should say his primary focus, is actually bringing to light some of these magicians from our history. So this way we learn more about them. And some of them are not as well known as, let's say, others like Houdini, etc. But he is a real Houdini-phile, has been interested in that a long time. And besides that, is not only a performing magician, but also has an interest in and is a very talented artist and has had several things that have been published. And perhaps you may have even seen some of his artwork on the cover of Magic Magazine, as well as other places around our community. He had a little exhibit apparently at Magic Live a few years ago as well. He has a very interesting past and certainly an interesting future with over 100 episodes. And I have to give credit to anyone who has that kind of longevity, I guess, within the podcasting business here. So I congratulate him for doing what he has done and is continuing to do. And I want to recommend also, if you have not heard of or follow the Magic Detective, it would be something that would be worth putting in rotation here, with the Magic Word podcast being the first one on the top of your list, of course. So, again, we have just a wonderful conversation that I think will give you some more information about his background and probably interest you enough that you might want to listen further to some of his podcasts. So, please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Dean Carnegie, here on the Magic Word. Today, we're going to be going and speaking with a gentleman who is another podcaster, and I always enjoy talking with these people because they are near and dear to my heart, obviously, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I certainly admire people who have done it for a while, meaning over 100 episodes. It, for a long time, was that few episodes really went that long. A lot of people were doing podcasts during the COVID and lockdown when there was really not much to do. But then after they got out, they found that, hey, there's no really great money in this, but it takes a lot of my time, and they died out. This is a gentleman, Dean Carnegie, that I'm going to be talking to today, who actually had a blog for a long time. And I want to talk about blogs because that's, I don't know, is that a thing of the past? Is that still relevant? I mean, how many people go and read today with such short attention spans? But then also developed his Magic Detective podcast, which I dearly love and highly recommend then as being in your rotation of other podcasts. His is not on a regular basis, like released every week or month or on a regular basis. It's kind of as available. We'll talk about that then too. But beyond that, he is a performing magician. So it's not just someone who has an interest in magic and in history. So he is near to my heart also because he is a magic historian as well as a podcaster, and he's an artist because I started out in art school myself and started out as an art major before I changed. I got away from it. The stuff he does is absolutely amazing. My friend Trixie Bond has a few of his paintings, which she has made into stained glass that she has in her house that is amazing. And anyhow, he's I'm going to shut up and let him talk for a while because he can too. These are two podcasters who like to talk. So this will be a fun episode. Please welcome my friend today, Mr. Dean Carnegie. Hey there, Dean.
Hey, Scott. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
Well, I'm glad that you are here as well. Now, just before we begin, you had said that in getting into the podcast that our mutual friend, Dot Vickers, had gotten you interested in this as well.
Yeah, well, back in the day, Dot Vickers, he had, I guess, what would be the first podcast. Mm-hmm. And I don't even think they called them podcasts back then. And I used to listen. I loved it. And I was like, man, I'd love to do this. But I'm like, well, he's kind of got the market cornered. He was the first one. So I didn't even give it a thought. And then I guess he sort of got into doing other things. And then you started doing yours. And I always had my blog. I've had my blog since 2010. And even before that, I had another blog. It's called themagicdetective.com, and it's all magic history. There are tons. It's got, I know last time I checked, it had like 3 million or 4 million downloads.
Wow.
So, it's not the biggest blog there is out there, but it does pretty well.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? How about if we take the blog and turn it into a podcast? Because everybody, and you're one of them, does great interview shows. And this is primarily what I hear in podcasting is so many people do interview shows, and that's great. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something different. So I was like, if I take my blog and take these articles I wrote and just narrate them, basically, I could have a podcast immediately. Well, that was the initial thought, but then I was like, when I started looking at my articles, it was like, each one of these needs to be expanded. So that basically I was rewriting the blog to get my probably first 20 episodes, and I got an audience really fast, which I was surprised about. So it's been 114 episodes in, and I have 200 or so on the docket yet to do. So, and I'm always adding to the list.
Now, when you say you have 200 more to do in the docket, are these things in your mind that you're thinking, I want to be sure to cover this aspect of magic? And in particular, that's another thing, by the way, you do people, not necessarily, you don't talk about cups and balls or the origin of the magic wand or whatever like that. You'll talk about Carnegie or whomever. You really focus more on the history of the person. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. I always do. Well, most of the people I do have passed away. So there are people, that are in our magic history past. I don't think I have any. I don't think I have any tricks per se in the docket. They're all people I want to cover. For example, when I say I'm always adding, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about sponge balls, and I said, "Oh, there's a sponge ball routine in Now You See It, Now You Don't by Bill Tarr."
Mm-hmm.
And my friend said, "Hey, there's a great guy to cover, Bill Tarr." And I'm like, yeah, I don't have him on the list. He'd be a wonderful person to add to the podcast, because we all know about the book, at least those of us of a certain age, I think, know about
Sure.
the book. But who he was, how he got into magic, that whole 9 yards, we don't know that story. So he would be a great one to tell. But I mean, I haven't covered Thurston yet. I haven't covered Blackstone yet. But I also like to cover people that aren't so well known. So you get a good variety. And another reason I do it, and you might find this interesting, is when you dig into the past of these people, sometimes you uncover effects that have been long forgotten that you can put in your program.
Right.
It may be a twist on an existing trick or something, but it may be a forgotten illusion or something. When there's a magician by the name of Chevalier Ernest Thorne, and I'd always heard the name, but I didn't know much about him. And as I began to dig into this guy's life, I could not believe how many illusions he created. One of the ones that we're familiar with is the mummy case. And it's sort of been forgotten these days. But he had this rich amount of illusions, and I'm talking large-scale illusions that he created that have all been, essentially, other than the mummy case, forgotten. So that's another reason I like to dig, because you can find basically old stuff that's brand new to today's audience.
I believe years ago, the Magic Collectors conventions, they would have a particular feature show that would be tricks long forgotten or not seen much or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. Well, David
I think Claude
Charvet
Crow hosted that years ago.
Yeah. David Charvet does a lot of, he does recreations of like Jack Gwynn, for example, and some other people, and just tricks that, again, you don't see anymore. And he brings them back, exactly how they presented them. Houdini's a great one. Houdini has a ton of material that, you hear about the milk can and the water torture and sun trunk, but he's got other things that people have forgotten about. When you show them, it's like, again, it's brand new material.
Well, that's true. True. Old things for new audiences.
Yeah.
As far as the people that you feature, I know you do have some people who are more nondescript, and I enjoy that. Same thing like with my podcast. I'd like to have Jeff McBride or Jeff Hobson or whomever that's on, but also I like to have people who are not as well known necessarily because I feel like I'm introducing a new friend to someone. It's kind of like, hey, I'd like you to meet my friend. And so some people who may not be listening to your podcast, I'd like to say, now you've made a new friend, you understand more about this podcast and this guy, and you'll like Dean. So anyhow, I think what you bring to light are some things that are and people who are not as well known and but have been instrumental in our rich tapestry of magic.
Oh, for sure. And there's so many stories, and I'll mention Houdini 100 times today, but he's the one that everybody knows.
Of course,
outside of magic, everybody knows Houdini, but there are all these other stories. In fact, there's I forget which episode it is, but there's a podcast episode I did on a guy that he was a magician. John Booth knew him pretty well, and turns out the guy was suspected of being a serial killer.
Oh, wow.
Elliot Ness, of all people, was on his trail.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this guy created the ABC stung trick.
I remember that.
Yeah, he created that. And and yet he turned out to be a potential serial killer. It was like, thankfully we don't have a lot of those in the magic world. But it was like, okay, well, this is going to be a fun story. And then of course there's the Blackstone story of him saving the audience from the theater fire. I mean, another great. That was like the only thing I've covered on Blackstone, and Blackstone is this huge.
Well, going back, I think that's kind of interesting story about Alexander, the guy. I've forgotten what his real name is. That ask Alexander. He was a con man.
Yes,
and he had quite a checkered history and against the law.
Oh yeah. Conklin was his last name.
Conklin, right?
First name, but he's on my list to do. But my buddy Gary Brown, Judge Gary Brown,
sure,
just put an article on him in how do you say that magazine, Gebersier? I'm not sure.
Gebersier.
Yeah. Everybody pronounces it differently, but he wrote this great article because he found all this stuff about the fact that Alexander may have been under all these different aliases and just even more of a con man than we thought of.
Wow.
So, so I'm like, I think I'm going to hold back on Alexander until we get all this information. So, but again, another great story.
Going back again, also to Dodd Vickers, who kind of got both of us started. He was the one who kind of, when I was with him on his podcast, he kind of kicked me out of the nest and said, why don't you start your own podcast? Because I was sending him reports from magic conventions. And he said, I don't want my podcast to be known as the Magic Convention Podcast. If you want that, why don't you do it? So it's like, I think I know what I'm doing now. So I kind of eased my way out. But the interesting thing I think about Dodd is his passion for magic, but he's not a magician. He's never been to a magic convention, doesn't belong to the local Atlanta club of magicians or 10 things, but he does a lot of research and deep diving. So when he talked with Johnny Thompson or Tom Mullica or Dick Cavett or whomever, he had Neil Patrick Harris. He spoke as if he was on the same level of us knowledge-wise because he had done the research. And he asked the right questions and knew what kind of follow-ups rather than just being a fanboy. Then also, it's just, and those podcasts, thankfully, will live out there. And that's what, I'm not trying to do something like his. I'm trying to have something that's more conversational. It was something in which I was hoping to be just that, in which I'm talking with friends and we happen to talk about something that's kind of interesting that I think the rest of the community wants to hear, as opposed to saying, who's your favorite magician? How'd you get started? What's your top 20 books and et cetera, which is a lot of what I believe that Dodd was doing. And it's important in his archives, which is called the Magic Newswire, I believe, which is still out there. And I'd recommend people to go and research that if you're looking for something to go some deep, because now back then, as you said, I don't know what they were called, but they weren't podcasts, but they were, you can go as long as you wanted to. And his were like 2.5 hours.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, even my early ones were quite long. And then somebody said, I think that an hour is about enough because that's whenever I go and work out at the gym or walk the dog or, whatever. That's about it. Now, yours is about 30 to sometimes 50 minutes. So, I mean, you talk about the material, and when you're done with the material, you kind of wind up the episode.
Yeah, no, I early on, I was doing a lot of different topics in an episode. And I think I was into like the 5th episode, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, how about if you just do one feature?" And I thought, okay, we can try that because I don't want to confuse people. So, so that's when I changed the format early on to doing one feature. And now, basically, what I do is I do a little bit of news firsthand, and then I go into the feature, and that usually runs roughly about 30 minutes, 35, 40 minutes. Because I have to do all the research for it. So it's not like coming off the top of my head. So I've got, I go to my library and I'm, Ask Alexander and all that stuff. And I'm writing out a script. And I know once I get to 8 or 9 pages, I've got about 30 or 40 minutes. But that's the only reason really that it takes me so, well, let's put it this way. I'm not so consistent. Is because it takes a long time to do that research. And then I'm famous for going down these rabbit holes of I find something out. I'm like, oh, hold on, I got to go here. And
Well,
it happens all the time.
You are so active in other kinds of things, obviously in performing and with artwork, both of which we'll get to here and then in a minute. And that takes just a lot of your time also. And
Yeah.
I understand of having the regularity of that. And I was told many years ago, and again, I'm listening to my listeners to what they tell me that they hear on other podcasts also. It's like, why don't you do this? For an example, I used to just break right into the podcast when we get started. And then I had someone who had said, I wish I had a summary beforehand to know what I was listening for, because it wasn't until about 30 minutes into it that's like, it unfolded. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really interesting. But I had to wait because I didn't know what was happening. So if you kind of summarize before, different things like that. So
Yeah.
I try to listen. And one said if you were on a regular basis, it would be something that I think you would have more listeners because they know when to tune in. So with yours, because again of your other, I'm retired pretty much from a lot of activities I was doing and from my full-time performing. So I can spend more time to do the podcast to get that done. You don't have that luxury at this point, perhaps in your life. So have you thought about trying to do it maybe once a month or, on some regular basis?
Well, I had actually hoped this year to do it once a month, and it's already turned out not to be that way. One thing I did do this year, which I've never done in the past, I've already planned out all the episodes for the year. So
Okay.
I know each one, which I've never done that before. Usually once I finish an episode, I'm like, okay, which one am I going to do now? And something will pop into my head. But this year I planned it out each one. Like the next one, once I finish it, is Bess Houdini, because everybody talks about Harry,
Sure.
they talk about Hardin, but they never talk about, actually, they don't talk about Hardin. But you don't hear much about Bess. So I thought, well, this would be kind of interesting to go down there and see what we can find out about her and her life. Because she was an outsider looking in. Initially, she was part of the act, but then when he became the solo act, she was really on the outside looking in. So it's like, well, let's look at it from her perspective and find out
I like that.
what her life was about. And so that's the next one. So
I'm going to ask you a question that people often ask me, and that is if they were going to get hooked onto your podcast, which one or ones would you say may not be your favorite, but it may be a fan favorite and something that would hook people saying, oh gosh, I like that, I'm going to listen to more?
Well, I mean, if they have a favorite magician from history, that I would look over the list and see if there's, somebody that they really, really like, Malini, for example, is, a lot of people like Malini because of the egg bag. And,
Sure.
I've covered him. I've covered Harry Keller. Harry Keller I went crazy on Harry Keller. I won't do that again. I did 3 episodes on Keller. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, I've got to cover everything. But I mean, he's got such an interesting life because in the midst of his career, he was involved in a shipwreck and lost everything. And it's like, what a great story. You can't miss this. So, you can kind of browse the list, and I'm sure you'll find something there. One of my favorite episodes, though, is actually one of the few that is not the typical me telling the narrating the life story of somebody. This one is called "The Devil and Harry Keller," and what it was a story that I wrote, a fictional story based upon Harry Keller's posters. And I was like, oh, okay. So if you look at his posters, you see these devils and imps and things. And I'm like, what if I wrote this story about how the devil tried to tempt Harry Keller into being the most famous magician of all time? And originally it was going to be like I was going to do it for a fringe festival. And then one day I was like, this would make a great like old time radio show. So I recorded it just like that. And it was a great episode. And then later I did one called the Houdini Broadcasts, which was actually a book that Mickey Hades published. And I got permission from him just before he passed away to record it. And what that one is, it's happens right after Houdini dies, and there's a radio broadcaster that's interviewing all these people from Houdini's life. And I do all the voices. So you hear Hardin and Dante and all these different people. And it sounds exactly like an old style radio show. So those are actually 2 of my favorites just because they're so different.
They are different. And I know which ones you're talking about. I listened to those, and they would be among my favorite there as well. Perhaps because they're so different. The others, again, are historical, although these are historical too. It was just, as you say, like listening to old time radio or something. You're listening to something that has a beginning, middle, and end kind of a thing. So, yeah, I did enjoy those certainly. And it is hard whenever you're trying to put that together, particularly if you're going to be having sound effects and everything. There have been 2 or 3 that I have done, like I did one with Charles Dickens of the Christmas Carol. And so throughout the year, I was talking with different magicians saying, would you read these lines as if you were, I had Mark D'Souza as Scrooge, for an example. And so I had other people who were, and then I did another one year with The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And I had Eugene Berger as the Grinch because I thought he had such a Grinchy type of a voice.
Oh,
and so within each of those shows, I also had sound effects of like whenever somebody was coming in, like Steve Bragazzi was coming into Scrooge's office, and then you could hear the door, the little bell ring above the door as he came in, and he was saying, "Sir, we'd like for you to donate to the poor children." And then Scrooge would say, "Aren't there places for these children to go? Well, they should go to the workhouse or whatever." Anyhow, but I had different people throughout the year that I had recorded and then put this all together. And as you would imagine, it took hours more time of that than any podcast that I've done. And I just didn't get the resonance that I thought I would. I didn't get the people who were saying, "Wow, that was great," or these. I did that 2 or 3 times with other things too. Just didn't go over as well as I thought.
Well, in my defense, I've only done 2 of them.
And you know how much time that it takes.
Yeah, they're brutal, and it does take time, and finding the right story or whatever is another thing. So just the 2 is. I'll probably do something else in the future, but and they were well received, but they're just like you said, they're really hard to put together.
Before I move on, I wanted to ask about video. Have you thought about putting video like YouTube, like we're recording right now on Zoom? And so for those who are listening to the audio portion of this, there is a video portion that you can go to watch and see our conversation if you wish. And some people do that. And there are apparently, according to my son, saying that a lot of people go to YouTube and don't even watch the video, but they just listen to podcasts on YouTube. And that's fine too. It's just another way of trying to expand your listener base. Have you thought of, or do you do anything with video with your podcast?
Well, the podcast as it is right now is on YouTube, so you can listen to it. But as far as the video version, I've done I think one interview. I did an interview with Judge Gary Brown over about Al Flosso, because he wrote the Al Flosso book. Mm-hmm. And so we did that over Zoom. But I took for the podcast, I took the audio track and I put that on. But I may at some point put the video version up. Before the podcast ever existed, I tried to do a Magic Detective YouTube show. And I will tell you, I knew nothing about lighting. I knew nothing about cameras. I knew nothing about microphones. Every episode was different as far as quality. There were only a handful of them. And I finally was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I got to get out of this because it's awful. They're not bad, but they're very short. Mm-hmm. I think the first one I did, I think was I talked about Steve Baker, who was known as Mr. Escape.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share this clip of Steve when he was down in, where was he? I think he was in Argentina. And he basically got blown up on live television. And I have the video footage of it. Mm-hmm. So I put that in the podcast. So, or not the podcast, but the YouTube show, so people could see it. I mean, it is crazy.
Horrific.
I mean, he's got third-degree burns and his hair's coming off and everything.
Wow.
Afterwards. And but I was like, oh, this will be fun. So I put that on, and
this will be fun.
Yeah. I went to visit Anna Eva Faye's grave a few years ago, and her grave is up in Massachusetts. And one of the really crazy things is she's in this little mausoleum, and it has a glass door on the front. And I happen to peer in through the glass door, and there's a statue of her in the back, which isn't too uncommon, except the family apparently dresses this thing up every few months, changes the clothing on it. So it might have a scarf and a hat and so I'm like, I got all these pictures of it because I'm like, nobody knows about this. So I was able to put that on the YouTube show. But I might change now that we have Zoom, and now that this ability to record like this is it didn't exist back when I tried to do the show before. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that I'm ever going to just primarily do.
There are so many different things, I would think, from an historical standpoint.
Yeah.
There may be some copyrighted material or whatever that you can't show or whatever, but I would think that video would lend itself to your type of podcast more than just about any other, because people are trying to get a visual image of what Valadin looked like or something,
Yeah, and I've thought of doing like one-off specials, video wise, where they could see the posters and maybe props that belong to these people, or do a demonstration of something that they made famous. So that could happen in the future. It's just another thing I got to add to the list.
Now, moving on to a different subject over here, but it is historical, and that is about Houdini. We are into the year in which Houdini is 100th anniversary of his passing, coming up this Halloween. And so there are so many things that are going to be going on. And I know one of the things that you are planning to do, or maybe you have already started doing, and that is that you have a different Houdini print. And we'll get to your artwork here shortly too. But you were offering these on your website, is that right? And you're producing something different, or do you have them already and ready to release, or are you still working on them? Or tell me about the project.
Well, the prints, I have about 6 Houdini paintings that I've already done. So that'll be the first 6 prints, and they're limited edition prints. It's not like a poster where there'll be hundreds of them printed. I think there are 3 of them on the store right now, and I think 2 of them. And when I say limited edition, it's like 25. Mm-hmm. which is pretty small. And I think I have one of them listed at 50. So, but it won't be any more than either 25 or 50. I've got two of them right here. If I'll tell you the store. It's Carnegie-magic.shopify.com.
Okay.
So this is one of the Houdinis. This is a caricature Houdini that this is this month's offering, actually.
It's beautiful.
And, it's actually there was another version of this, a much older version that had lots of colors, and I redid it in the blues. I like it much better, but it's a really interesting version. But then I go
for those, by the way, who are not viewing this on video, I suggest if you go to the magicwordpodcast.com, I'm going to have some of the still photos, and you can see that there.
Yeah, and it's that one was a sort of an abstract caricature. This one right here, completely different style.
It is,
and one of my favorites. It's a profile of Houdini.
It looks more like a stained glass in a church.
Yeah, well, that was the intention, because I was
synagogue in his case, I guess.
I wonder what it would look like if Houdini was in a stained glass window. Now, there's no religious connotation here.
Of course,
just I like that imagery of the stained glass window. So that's how I painted that one right there, and it's offered as a print. I think that one's only 25, limited to 25, and they're available right now. Each month I put a new one up. Mm-hmm. And so they'll actually be, by the time it finishes, 13 different Houdini paintings. So I've got a few that I have to paint. And then along with the Houdinis, there are a bunch of others, a lot of other magicians. And you mentioned Trixie Bond. Trixie has a number of my originals, and she's got a Keller and Dante. I think those were the two that she had turned into stained glass windows.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've only seen pictures, so you've seen them in person, I think.
Yeah, I go and visit her house quite frequently, and I see those in her room there. Yeah, it's fantastic. She's got lighting behind it. They look great.
Wow.
I will put those pictures up on the blog then too. Well, rather than going in the direction of Houdini, we'll talk about that in a minute. Since we're on artwork, let's talk a little bit about that. So do you have a lot of background as far as, did you have art training, or did you, for an example, I know that Rick Heath was someone who didn't have an art background, but when Cesario said, you're going to be the guy who will be doing our posters and paintings and things, he's like, okay, and he learned how to do it. Did you kind of learn how to do it because it was something to do, maybe during COVID, or did you go to art school, or what?
No, I was always interested in art in school, and in my senior year in high school, my art teachers told me to apply for the senior art award because I would win it, and I was like, doing that? I'm going to be a magician. I'm going to Chavez. So I didn't apply for it, but I was always interested in magic, and so I missed out on the scholarship from high school, but like I said, was always interested in art. And then one day I was a family vacation. We were in Hawaii, and I was in Honolulu, walking down the street, and there was an art gallery. And I looked inside, and I in the very back were pictures of clowns painted by Red Skelton. He was very famous for his clown paintings.
Right.
And I saw these, and I was like, oh, wow, this is the Skelton paintings. There was the Carol Burnett painted as a clown, and it was so cool to see. But then I look over to my right, and there's a sculpture by Anthony Quinn, the actor. And I'm like, what is this? And I look over, and there is a painting by Tony Curtis. Mm-hmm. And everything in this art gallery was painted by celebrities. And right then and there, I said to myself, you know what? That's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do magic for my career. And then when I retire, I'm going to do art. I'm going to sell paintings. And then, so that was it. Came out of my head after that. I didn't give it another thought until a few years later. I wanted to get a gift for a buddy of mine, and I was like, what do I get him? He was a fellow magician, and I'm like, you know what? I'll paint a picture. And I hadn't painted now since high school. So, who knows how this is going to turn out. Well, it just so happens it turned out really well. I gave it to, and it was this abstract caricature thing. And I gave it to him, and he, like, at first he looked at it, he wasn't sure what he was seeing. And then he said, "Oh my gosh, that looks like me." And I'm like, yeah. And so between Christmas Eve and New Year's, I did like 10 paintings. I couldn't stop. I was like hooked. I couldn't
sleep.
No. Well, seriously, when I would sleep, there would be canvases and paint tubes on my bed, because I would just get up and start painting. And when I was tired, I'd lay down. And this is how it went. And then for another year, I didn't paint. And then the following year, I did the same thing again. So now I have, I don't know, 100 or so paintings that I've done over the last 25 years. And I've only just recently, in the last few years, started selling some of the originals. And people keep asking me, "Why don't you do prints? Why don't you do prints?" And whenever I would hear prints, I would hear posters. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. And then another friend of mine said, "No, what you need to do are limited edition high-end prints." And she walked me through the whole process. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. This is doable then. So I found a company that could do the prints real high quality. And so now I'm releasing, I think I mentioned, there's like 12 or 13 prints, including the Houdinis, and all different styles, all different magicians. And that's just a sampling of what I have. I mean, there's just so many.
And what I think is amazing when I look at the prints that are on your page is the diversity of styles. I mean, you look like that you were influenced by so many different people. I mean, Picasso and this Cubism period, and all these other kinds of things that some that are more realistic, or, I mean, there's how do you decide when you're going to draw a picture of, or paint a picture, let's say, of Lance Burton, that it's going to be stylized versus actual trying to look more like him?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons there's a lot of different styles was when I started painting these like 25 years ago, I hadn't painted in forever. So I was kind of relearning all over again. And so I did those abstract caricatures initially. And then the next thing, I really liked the artist Leroy Neiman.
Oh, me too. One of my favorite artists.
Yeah, who did the sports pictures and stuff.
Right.
And so I was like, I love his work, but I have no idea how to paint like that. So I took a really small canvas and a canvas board, and I tried to do a painting of Carnegie. And I just thought, this thing looks like garbage. And I left it in the office. I went home, and my buddy Ralph, we shared an office together. He came in the next morning and saw the painting and called me. And he said, "Dude," he goes, "did you do this?" And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, "The Carnegie thing. Did you painted that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it looks like crap, doesn't it?" He's like, "Oh my God, no." And so I went back in, and the big error, and you probably know this having done art yourself, when you're up close, sometimes things don't look the same way as they do if you step a few feet away.
Sure.
And sure enough, when you stepped away a little bit, all of a sudden the picture looked incredible. And I was blown away by it. And it was, again, this my version of what Leroy Neiman might do. And I sent a picture of it to an art magazine in my area back then. And they were like, they called me up as soon as they got it. They said, "Hey, we want to do an article on you, and we want to put this on the cover." And I went, "Oh, okay, wow. Sure." So it happened like almost instantly. And then when the magazine came out, I took 2 magazines. I sent one to Jeannie, to Richard Kaufman, and one to Stan Allen at Magic Magazine. And Richard put a picture of the magazine in his Jeannie Speaks, which was really nice. I wasn't asking for anything. He was like, he did that. That was awesome. That was all I cared about. Mm-hmm. Stan, on the other hand, Stan called me on the phone and said, "Hey, I got your magazine. we need to talk. And so what ended up happening is that same painting ended up on the cover of Magic Magazine, and their Carnegie.
Was that the Carnegie? I remember. Yeah, I remember that episode, that issue.
Yeah, and so it ended up there. And then he said, we also want to do an interview with you and include some of your artwork. So that was the following month. But then he said, oh, by the way, do you think you can come to Magic Live and bring some of your artwork? And so one year I had a display of some of my artwork at Magic Live. I had to fly it there because I was busy doing shows. And so they had it on display. I flew out for one day to be there with my artwork and then flew back. And but that was, Stan was so nice about that, and featured a number of my pieces in the magazine. So and it's appeared, the paintings have appeared in books and other magazines and lots of things since then. So, and I'm sure that's probably how Trixie found out about.
Is that still one of your long-term goals? That is, whatever retirement is going to be for you, of actually doing more painting and less podcasting and less performing?
Oh, well, I don't know. I would like to do more painting, but I was a kid when I thought of that idea in Hawaii. Now I'm like, I want to go out like Tommy Cooper, dying on stage. I heard recently Penn Jillette talking about he and Teller, and they plan on going basically until they can't go anymore. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, that's probably going to be me. I'm probably going to keep going until I can't go anymore.
I got to wonder if Siegfried and Roy would still be going today, because, gosh, I don't know if they would or not. I mean, they would probably be in their, 80s, I guess, at this point.
Yeah.
So at some point, the knees just don't allow you to jump in and out of the sub-trunk,
Well, you do have to change your style. I mean, Jonathan Pendragon had to change from doing the Grand Illusion to more of a stand-up act.
Right.
Just because of the physicality. But I mean, if you think about, there are plenty of magicians do illusions where they're not jumping in the stuff. So, I mean,
that's true. I guess because of Siegfried and Roy had the spectacle of the animals as well, and the dragon and everything, the dancers and everything else. I mean, their reputation was already solid, so they could just come out and kind of point to things happening. I guess that
exactly.
They could. On that issue, and kind of going to some of the people that you talk about who are the illusionists, who are what I used to call boxmen, in which they were really not dancing. I mean, you look at performers today who actually engage, let's say Rick Thomas, who actually is a trained dancer, or some others who are in dance with their assistants. The old ones, I mean, Dante or Blackstone Senior or whatever, actually would just kind of point to the box and these things would happen. But it wasn't the boxes. It wasn't the dancers. It was still the magician that people talked about. What do you think that made them stand out and made them that essence that people wanted to see?
Well, back in the day, the illusions were new.
Yeah, of course.
So that
sawing in half and all that, the golden came out. I mean, everybody wanted to see that. But there were boxes that people wanted to see, but still, it was the magician that made it happen, the wave of the wand.
Well, one of the things that I always think about when it comes to illusion magic, there was a show a number of years ago called Showgirls of Magic. I don't know.
I remember that. Yep. And I think Steve Daly was in that show.
One of the things and I knew some of the girls in Showgirls of Magic, and it was okay for what it was. But one of the things I realized was, even though these are the same girls that would be in the act if there were a magician there, and doing the same thing, it didn't have the same impact as if a magician was there, orchestrating everything. And this is where David Copperfield walks on stage and does his illusion, and you're like, whoa. But because there's every artist, every magician of a certain caliber has charisma, and they bring that to the piece. Lance Burton, Doug Henning, David Copperfield, Pendragon, they all bring that to the box. So it becomes more than just this box, or more than just whatever it happens to be. It's more, David was famous for his vignettes, his stories, and
Right.
even when he got away from the vignettes and stories, there was still some through line, something that you understood as it went through. I remember one of his kind of unusual pieces where he had this strange shaped box, and on the front it had a picture of a girl, and the girl got inside, and then he started erasing parts of the picture,
Yeah.
and then he'd open the box and that part of her would be gone. And what a great premise for a trick. It was a Steinmeier illusion, but David took it up a couple notches from what the original was. And I think every magician brings that charisma to their illusions. And I'll be honest, and if they don't, there's plenty of magicians that don't, they probably shouldn't be doing illusions, because illusions are their own thing. Not everybody can do them. But, then again, there's people that can do an egg bag, and an illusionist can't pull that off.
Yeah.
So everybody has their little niche that they can excel in. And like I said, illusion is kind of its own thing. I mean, I'm looking here in the wall behind me, there's a picture of Fu Manchu. They say that Fu Manchu had one of the greatest acts of the 20th century. And yet he only performed in America a very short time. And he couldn't even perform as Fu Manchu because there was a movie studio that owned the rights to the name Fu Manchu. But he had colorful backdrops. Well, if you saw Le Grand David, you know what Fu Manchu's act was like.
Because Cesario was a student of Fu Manchu's, and that's why it looked so much like that, certainly.
Exactly.
And you were mentored by Denny Haney, as well as, I guess, Cesario and a few others who have kind of helped you along your early path. And Cesario was quite a gentleman, and David Bull and the whole staff. I mean, I've went out there several times and spent a lot of hours with them.
Oh, yeah. Well, Cesario and I always think of him. We had this kindred spirit, the two of us. I remember him talking to his to the crew, as it were, to his the family, and every once in a while he would try and kind of crack him into shape. And I remember sitting in the theater watching him do this during a rehearsal, thinking, he's so full of it. He is just so full of it, and he was just letting them have it. And then he turned and looked at me, and he couldn't help but crack a smile. And I knew he was full of it. And I'm sure they knew it too, but this was just the process that he went through. He was a great guy. I learned a lot about illusion magic from him, a lot about illusion magic from Denny. I used to go to Denny's. This is early on. His shop, I think his shop was open till like 11 o'clock at night, and it was always crowded. And then at 11, people would leave, and I would hang out from 11 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning talking illusion magic with Denny. And he would set me straight on so many things. He'd be like, oh no, you're going to do the zigzag. Here's how you do the zigzag, and walk me through it and the reasons why. And I learned so much from that guy.
Well, Denny had done so much, of course, being a stage performer himself and being on the college circuit for so many years and traveling around with Lee, his assistant. And I'm sure he had just worked out all of the kinks and all of the problems of everything so that he could be a really good mentor.
Yeah. Oh, well, again, he was a magic shop owner, but he had done it. He had, unlike Al Cohen, who I love to death, Al Cohen from Al's Magic Shop, Al was always a magic shop owner.
He was just behind the counter. He was not a performer. Yeah.
But Danny, on the other hand, was, like you said, the real deal. He was out there doing colleges and theaters and all sorts of things, performing in Asia. And I mean, in every kind of situation you could imagine. So he was the guy, if you were going to learn anything, he was the guy to learn from. And, I'm just one of so many people that, basically sat at his knee. I mean, Scott Alexander, Puck. I mean, so many guys learned from Denny, and, just incredible information.
Yeah, that's another book that I would recommend. That is was excellent. That I believe Scott Alexander had written about Denny. That I'd recommend.
yeah, the Denny book is well, the story of Denny. I mean, as many times as I hung out with Denny, there are stories in there I never knew. But then it's also the latter half of the book is Denny's act.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just here's the trick Denny did, it's here's the trick he did and why this is done this way.
It was well written. Yeah.
Oh, just brilliant stuff. And Denny was still alive as it was being written. He passed away before it was published, but he had his hand in there on because he told Scott, he said, you put everything in, you put the cuss words in, you put everything in, don't edit it at all. And so he did.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of get towards the end over here, I did talk briefly about Houdini and this being the 100th anniversary, and you're going to be celebrating that by offering these different print then each month as well. I assume that and I know that you've had several podcasts about Houdini over the years, over the last 100 plus that you've had. Are there some more that you have planned to talk about some aspect of Houdini? And I assume that you kind of go to John Cox and go to his wonderful blog to get details from time to time there too.
Well, it's funny, and I'm glad you mentioned John. He and I started our blogs at the same time. We both had blogs before we switched over to a platform called Blogger. And so we both started at the same time. I actually wanted to do a Houdini blog, but he was already doing it. And I was like, that's where the Magic Detective came in. And I was like, okay, I'll do magic history, but whenever I can do Houdini, I will.
I find it amazing that John finds something every day that is a new aspect about Houdini, something going on somewhere.
Well, for the first few years, it was kind of fun because we would kind of trade off back and forth on information. But then I was like, this is not making me any money. I got to get back to work. And so, put my emphasis back on doing shows. And man, he took off like wildfire. And like you said, his blog there's something new every day or some news about Houdini. I'm still able to pull something out of my hat from time to time on Houdini. So, and I have, there are a number, like I mentioned Hardin. I will be covering Hardin on the podcast this year, Bess. And I've got another aspect on Houdini that I'll be covering. I also have, going back to the videos, I'm going to be doing some short informational videos on Houdini. I haven't gotten to it yet, but one of the things I noticed on YouTube is there's all these people that do these little clips on Houdini, and none of them know what they're talking about. They end up getting something wrong here and there, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do these short YouTube videos on Houdini, so people get, especially in this year of the 100th anniversary of his death, how many people know that there were 5 Houdinis? It's not common knowledge.
No, worldwide, a lot of people tried to replicate his act and his name and his fame.
Yeah, well, this is 5 Houdinis during his time. Yeah. So
that actually used the name Houdini. I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's I'll do something on that. I can cover the history of the milk can. I mean, so many different things. One of his greatest tricks that we forget about, and one of the ones he did the longest, was the needle swallow. He carried that with him everywhere he went. When he went to a newspaper office, he would demonstrate that. That was one of the reasons he got the paper so often, is because he had this, instead of showing a card trick, which he often did too, he did this needle thing. I mean, can you think about it for a second? Some guy you never heard of is taking needles and he's sticking them in his mouth and swallowing them and showing, look at my mouth. I can't, and then swallowing some string and then threading them. I'm going to do an article on that guy if I see that in person.
Sure.
So, brilliant. And then he would turn around and do it on the biggest stages where people couldn't even see this stuff. But yet it became synonymous with him. And he didn't create it. But, it's a great, great illusion still done today. Teller probably does the best version.
Yeah, that was something I would imagine that once it was published in the newspaper, even though people couldn't see it, they had read about it. It's like, oh, I think he's doing that down on the stage there. They're looking from way back in the theater. But yeah, it was Mahindra, I believe, that there was a pamphlet by Mahindra, which the San Antonio ring is named after Mahindra. Forgot his first name right now.
Okay.
But there was a booklet, and when I was out at the for the Houdini convention that they had in Brooklyn or out in New York this last Halloween. There was a fellow who was talking about that and had a copy of this booklet that Mahindra had. I guess that was something that was influential, I guess, in him learning the needle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And well, I mean, he took it. Well, I say he took it and made it his own. I've since learned that he tried to stop everybody else from performing the needles.
I think he tried to stop a lot of people from doing a lot of things that he did. As you said, they were using his name, and so they were trying to keep. He was trying to keep people, obviously, from not only infringing on his name, but also people who would throw a water can toward. I mean, he would do them first, and other people, I could do that, and so. But he was the first to do that, and tried to. I'm sure that he tried to ban a lot of people worldwide from trying to recreate or copy his act. Certainly.
Yeah.
I think the little things you're talking about, the YouTube shorts, would be a great idea. If you just had your camera set up in your room there and you have a list of things, you can go in for like 3 minutes and you record today's video is going to be about X, tomorrow will be about Y or whatever, and just kind of go all the way through. And you could do that through to the end of the year, by keeping them short enough, and you will start to create a huge audience.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the plan. Like I said, I haven't done it yet. In fact, I just put the green screen back up over the weekend because I had an AGT audition, which
did you really? Well, good luck with that.
Well, thank you, but I was telling a friend of mine, I'm like, okay, I just put the check that off my list, but I ain't holding my breath. I've auditioned for them so many times.
Have you? Well, years ago, they used to contact me, but I had no end game. There wasn't a theater, or I didn't have a theater that I wanted people to put their butts in their seats. And I was kind of nearing the end of my career, and I thought, okay, well, I really don't need more corporate work. I'm doing okay enough from what I'm doing. So and at the time, they were not really in favor of magicians. Not any magicians were winning or even going too far. They were kind of being made fun of. That obviously had changed. Have you been on Penn and Teller Fool Us?
No, and I just heard that they're opening auditions for them again.
That is correct. Yes, they are, and so they've been renewed for another. I don't know what that is. That 13 seasons now or whatever. That's fantastic, and it's good for magic.
Yeah, they're the best show for magic on TV. I love that show. I've auditioned for them, I think twice. Mm-hmm. One of the things they tell you up front is don't do card tricks.
Don't do card tricks. Yeah,
because they just get so many.
Sure.
The last time I auditioned, I had this great trick with of all things leaves, and it was a version of what is that trick that Max Maven put? Bee wave.
Yeah.
So it was bee wave with leaves, if you can imagine this.
It's interesting. I'm trying to.
This is going to get me on the show, and I didn't get a call back. And I'm like, what? And then I see like the first episode of the new season, and it's a guy that won FISM doing a trick with leaves. And I went, oh, no wonder they didn't call me. So
yeah, I see.
But yeah, I'll be auditioning for them again.
Well, I do thank you very much for being my guest here this week, and I know that my podcast is called the Magic Word Podcast, and so what would be your magic word that's important to you?
I'm not sure if it would be a magic word as much as a magic phrase.
Well, a phrase, yeah. It could be a phrase.
Nothing is impossible.
Beautiful, yeah. And you've proven that with different things. I mean, as far as your artwork that you've turned around or gone from blog to podcast and the different things that you've done in your life over here, that's been just great, and nothing's impossible.
Well, it's all Houdini. I mean, when I was a kid and read about Houdini, he wasn't just a magician. He was an author. He was an aviator. He was all these different things. And I realized at 8 years old, I don't need to do one thing. I can do a whole lot of things. So that was the inspiration.
Were you influenced by the 1957 movie, Tony Curtis movie of Houdini?
Yeah, the 1953. Yeah.
53.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, it's funny. He was my first Houdini before the real Houdini. Tony Curtis was the first one, and then and actually when I saw that, the next day I drove my bike to the local mall and I bought the book Houdini: The Untold Story by Milbourne Christopher.
Mm-hmm.
So, and read it cover to cover, and I still have that copy. It's like falling apart. It's all taped up, and thankfully we have eBay, because I was able to go on eBay and find the exact same one in a fresh version,
better condition. Yeah.
So so I have my original, but then I have a replacement. So.
Well, Dean, thanks very much. I appreciate the time that you've given me. I know that you're a busy guy, and also you have a lot of things that you have planned for this coming year, and I look forward to all of your different endeavors. If ever do you travel much doing your magic show where people might be able to see you perform? Or?
All the time, yep, all the time.
So they can go to your website, and what is that?
CarnegieMagic.com is the main website, and usually if I'm traveling, I'll put a notation up where I'm going to be. If it happens to be a ticketed show, I'll most definitely post it. I post it more on social media, because it seems like social media is where people go. So,
and then one last time also, as to where they can go for the prints, what's the website?
Oh, that is Carnegie-Magic.shopify.com.
Got it. Again, Dean, thanks very much for your time and your words. It's been really great. And I think a lot of people have learned some things here. So I would, again, encourage everyone to, if you have an opportunity, if you listen to some podcasts, and obviously you do because you're watching or listening this, that you should go over to The Magic Detective that features Dean Carnegie. Thanks again, Dean. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate you having me. You have a great day.
You bet. This is Scotty out. Thank you, Dean, again for being my guest this week on the Magic Word Podcast. I believe I certainly got a lot out of it, and some different perspectives of your different multifaceted life. And I'm going to go over and take a look at some of the pictures that you've got, the prints that are available over there. And I do recommend that you guys go and check that out also. The websites have been shown before, but here's one that will take you to the website where you can actually see those as well. And if you are interested in purchasing some prints, you can, but his podcast is free. So if you go and check out wherever you listen to podcasts, you can then add The Magic Detective to your rotation. Well, this has been, again, a great conversation, and thank you, listeners, very much for coming along with us here this week. So until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember that nothing is impossible. This is Scotty out.